Hello, my friends, and welcome to another Penpot Hands-On session, the spooky edition. So this time around, I'm going to demo to you how to use colours in Penpot, and that includes colour palettes and using shared libraries for your colours. Hopefully, I'm going to come up with some good little tricks and treats throughout the next 45 minutes or so. Please ask questions. We are here live, unless you're watching this back recorded. And so if you want to ask questions on the platform you're watching this on, whether that's YouTube or LinkedIn or elsewhere, most of those platforms we can bring your questions in and I can answer them here live and demo for you. So please do, or just say hi and let us know where you're writing from and where you are right now. We'd love to hear from you. So what is Penpot? I should just let you know that first. Penpot is a really cool open source design tool. It's based on the web and it is great for both designers and developers. And that's something that is very relevant when you're working with color, as you will see later on. And so I have a huge amount to get through with you today and lots of cool demos to share. So maybe let's jump straight into it with looking at fill and stroke colors. So here on my screen, I have for you a little note card that I've designed. I mean, everyone knows about designing cards. We do so much of it now. But right now, it's very bland looking. It's very dark. There's no color. And so we need to start off by adding some color to this card. Now, when you draw a shape in Penpot, like that, it will default to being this kind of gray color. And the first thing you probably want to do is change that to something a bit more exciting. So I can show you how to do that. Now, if you scroll down in the design panel, you've got the object selected on the canvas. You have the fill option here. Now, what you can do, if you already know the hex code that you want your color to be, you can enter that in to the input here. But chances are you don't know the hex code and you just want to open up the color picker. So you can do that by pressing on the swatch. And this brings up our Penpot color picker. Now, what you can do here is you can choose from the spectrum and find a different color in there. Just drag it around, find the color that you'd like. Once you have a color selected in here, you can also use this slider here to go through the different hues. And so the hues are whereabouts you're going in the rainbow, I think, for want of a better term. And below that you have the alpha, or the opacity. And so that controls whether your color is completely solid or whether it has some transparency to it. You have different levels of that. And so if it's no transparency, you can see that my fill here is fully opaque. You can't see the background at all. But if I drag it to be more transparent, the gray that's behind it starts to show through. So transparency is quite a cool thing to play with when you're designing UIs as well. And so that is how you would add a stroke, fill, sorry. Next on to strokes. Now strokes are in a very similar way. If we scroll down here, now a stroke is an outline around the outside of your object. You could call it a border. And so you can add that by pressing the plus button alongside the stroke section. And this is added right now by default. It's added black, which is represented by 6 zeros in hex code. And it's just 1 pixel wide. I'm going to make that 5 just so it's a bit clearer so you can see it a bit better on your screens as well. And again, you can either enter in a hex color or you can click on the swatch to open up your color picker and pick any color that you would like from there. And so I don't know, maybe I'm not really sure about this green I've used, but we'll stick with this theme. We'll go kind of tealy green, and maybe I'll make it a slightly darker kind of tealy green color. You can also change the fill color of other objects that aren't just shapes as well. And so one example of this is your text. So right now, one of the things that we would consider a lot in design is the contrast of the color. So how the text reads against the background color. That's really important because it's one of the things that makes text accessible on the web. A lot of people will perceive and see color in different ways, and we want to make sure that even if they maybe have color blindness maybe if they have a loss of sight, maybe if they have some sort of impairment that is preventing them from seeing the colours in the same way that you as the designer see them. A high contrast between the text and the background colour will make it easier for everybody to read it, unless of course they are blind and they can't see the colour at all, which is why it's really important not to use colour as an indicator. So not using traffic light colours, or if you do, specifying when it's stop and when it's go so that everyone can understand why you're using those colours. So I'm going to change the colour here of the text. Now actually this kind of middling green is a bad background colour because a very light colour and a very dark colour, both of those will be fairly low contrast. So I'm going to just lighten that up a touch. So I'm opening up the swatch, and I love just dragging the dropper around to pick a colour that I like better. So I have quite a light bright one. Now I want to change the text colour. So to do this I'm going to select the text itself and change the fill colour of that. I'm going to now use the dropper. So what the dropper can do is it can pick from any colour that's already on the canvas. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to pick, I want to use the border colour. I want to have a slightly darker version of that border colour, like this. And I think that looks pretty good. And I'm going to use that same colour. I'm going to copy the hex code for this. There's many ways you can reuse colours, but I'll just show you just copying the hex code for now. And I'm going to use this to change the colours of these texts as well. Oops, selecting each of them. If I've selected all those colours at the same time and they all have the same fill colour, I can add a new fill colour for those to paste it in that colour. And I've changed all of those now simultaneously. And so now I have, it's a kind of tealy theme, but it works. What I can also do is I can pick colours from an image. So here is an image I brought in earlier, very on theme for Halloween with some pumpkins. So maybe I want to change my fill colour to an orange colour that matches the pumpkins. So for that I'm going to bring up my colour picker again, and this time I'm going to use the dropper tool over the image, and you can see it's giving me a little preview in this window of the different colours I can choose, and I'm just going to go for this colour. And so now I have orange and teal. Everyone knows there's a really attractive colour combination. I'm going to make that a little lighter, and for that I'm going to start going through to the different options that I have in the colour picker here. And so the first tab of the colour picker, this is my spectrum. The second tab I have harmony, and I'll come to that a bit later. And the third tab I have these sliders here. And so in these sliders I have hue, H, saturation, S, value, V, and alpha, that's your transparency again, your A. And I'm actually going to make this a lighter, brighter shade of orange, and I'm going to do that by dragging the saturation up, and that makes it a much lighter colour. And I want to add a bit of white into it, so I'm going to jump back into the first panel and the spectrum, and I'm actually going to drag this from here into the lighter, brighter side of the spectrum. So it's more of a hint of pumpkin we've got going on. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the other features of the colour picker. I jumped into that a little soon, so let's have a look at how to use that colour picker in more depth. So I'm going to bring up this colour picker again. This time I'm going to improve upon that stroke colour that I've got. And so I'm selecting the swatch, I'm bringing up the colour picker, and I want to show you what's going on in this second tab here, the Harmony tab. So the Harmony tab gives you your selected colour, and it gives you the equivalent colour that is complementary on the colour spectrum. So you might have heard that orange and blue are opposites on the colour spectrum. You can see that on this wheel here. Maybe you want yellow and purple, they're also opposite on the colour spectrum. And so say I wanted to pick a complementary colour to the tealy greeny colour I've got here, I will just select that in the opposite colour on the wheel, and I've ended up with this kind of warmer red colour. That's quite nice actually. And again, I can choose the value on the slider here, so I can go very bright or very dark, and I can also choose the opacity to make it lighter and darker. This is quite a nice way of layering colour, is to add a transparency over another colour, and it kind of adds a slightly different shade or tint to your colour as well. In this third tab that I showed you before as well, we have those H, S, V and A sliders. Now I would say one of the most common uses I would have for this is, I see this a lot when people are first starting to use Penpot. They draw a shape like this and they have this grey colour, and they're like, right, I want to change the colour of this rectangle. So they open up their panel and they start using this hue slider, and they slide it around and they go, well, it's still grey. I can't work out why it's still grey. And that's because grey is a very desaturated colour. And so it doesn't, if you can add a different hue to it, but it will still be grey. And so if you want to saturate it, we go to this third panel here, and we go to the S in HSV, we go to the saturation, and we drag it until it's completely saturated. And now you can see that this grey is actually blue, and I can change the hue very easily. So if that saturation is all the way down, these are all grey. Sometimes it's nice to have a slightly saturated shade of grey. It's a lot more subtle than a lot of default greys. So I think that that can add something to it. But just in case you're wondering why you can't get out of that grey colour, it's usually that you want to change the saturation level. I wanted to very quickly show you something very exciting that has very recently been launched at Penpot and is completely relevant to this. So you know I was telling you a moment ago about the colour contrast between your background colour and your foreground text, and you wanting to make sure that that contrast is accessible. Well, there are these accessibility guidelines called the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and they provide an algorithm for working out whether your colours, your two colours, are within an acceptable range of contrast. It's a nice way to have a rule that helps kind of reinforce, okay, this is high enough contrast if it's hard for you to perceive that for yourself. Now what's great is Penpot now has plugins, and the Penpot team has already made a really cool plugin for this. And so you can look on this channel, this platform, wherever you're watching us from, and find out more about plugins if you look at the previous post by Penpot. So I'm just going to show you, I've already got this installed. I'm going to open up the plugins. I'm going to open up this contrast plugin. Now this says to me, select two filled shapes to calculate the color contrast between them. So I'm going to choose my card, and I'm going to choose the text. And you see now I have the background color selected and the text color selected, and it is telling me that I have a contrast ratio of 8.33 to 1, and this is telling me that it is accessible. AAA is like really high contrast, is really good accessibility wise. It's what we'd ideally aim for, and AA is what we would settle for in a lot of cases, and it's what a lot of people aim for in their general work, is to have AA. And so this is saying, look, if you're using it for normal text, then it's all good. If you're using it for large text, it's all good, and it's good for graphics as well. So this is a really cool plugin that I would recommend everyone gets and uses it right away. It's going to make your work a lot better and a lot more accessible too. Now, I want to show you the final things in this color picker, which aren't necessarily specifically color, but are worth knowing about too, is from this drop-down area. You have the options for solid color. You have the options for a linear gradient. So that's a gradient with two color stops, as we refer to them. So this at the beginning is a stop, and this at the end is a stop. And here we have a fully saturated opaque orangey color, and at the very end stop we have the same color, but it has no opacity whatsoever. It's completely transparent, and so it creates a gradient of solid to transparent. Linear, because it's in a line. We can have a radial gradient, which does a similar thing but with a kind of circular shape, and you can tweak and change the shape and where that origin point is for that. I've made that a very thin sort of line there. And you can also have an image background as well, and that's really useful if you want to add maybe something like an image in the background of your text. Really useful for web designs where you want a full bleed image in the background there. Return to a solid colour. Let's go back, pick a nice, say nice, this is a very ugly design I created here. I'll show you a prettier one in a minute, I promise. Oh, and one final thing, in the colour picker, opening it up again here, sometimes you want to have very specific values in your colours, and so for example you want to have a hex code, which is probably the most common colour format on the web. You might want the RGB format of a colour, and so you can grab or enter those values in here, including the alpha here as well, and so there's a very easy way to adjust or grab the precise values from there if you want. For development, I'll show you a little bit more about that later. And in this little drop down section right at the very bottom, we have the option for a library and recent colours, but I'm going to come back to that in just one moment because we're going to look at saving file colours next. So I've got this really interesting yellowy orange colour. It's not very pretty, but I want to save it to reuse it elsewhere in my design. So how do I do that? As I mentioned before, in this little drop down here, we have the option to show your recent colours. So this shows an enormous array of the different colours I've selected recently, which are all this different shade of orange. I'm just going to select a different colour so I can show you how that actually does work with other colours too. There we go. We've got other colours in there now as well. That looks bad, so I'll just switch it back. So maybe I want to save this colour for reuse elsewhere. The way that I do that is I can go to the File Library section in the drop-down. There's nothing in there right now, but you can see that I've now got a plus button just here. And what that allows me to do is I hit it, and that's just saved this colour to this little palette section. But it's not just here. Now if I go to the Assets section, here in the left, I have colours in my local library, and I have one colour in there. And if I open that up, I can see the colour that I've just saved. And this is actually selected, ready for me to rename it and give it a much more useful name. So perhaps I'm going to name this colour Card Background. And I've just saved that. And now I have this colour saved, so maybe I want to create a different object somewhere else that's going to share the same background. So this will also be some kind of card, I think. I won't add text right now. If I want to use that colour, I can open up my swatch and I can choose it from my file library here, or I can choose it from the option here as well, or I can choose it from the colour palette, but I'm going to show you that in a moment. Now that I've got this named colour, if I edit it, and now I've applied it to the card and I've applied it to this rectangle here, if I want to edit it, I can change it and say I want to go for just white, like a bright white colour. So I've chosen that bright white colour. You can see it previewed here. I'm going to save that colour style, and it's going to change that colour everywhere it's used. That is one thing I forgot to mention. This is what I do all the time. When you save a colour to your file library, so I saved this orangey colour to my file library, you then need to apply that colour back to the object you had selected. It won't be applied by default. So I'm going to go again and choose that card background. Let me show you again how we would change that. So now our card background colour is white. go into my assets, go into my colors. My card background color is white. I'm going to edit it. Now this card and this rectangle both use the card background color, and I'm going to change it to a sort of pinky color, save that color style, and there we go. It's updated in both of those locations. So that is one trick, I suppose, that you don't want to miss, is you want to make sure that when you save a color to your file, that you then apply that color back to its original object. Now, another very cool thing, once you've got these colors saved here, if you are a developer or someone who is working with code and you want to share these color names as variables as your shared language in your team, if we go to inspect mode, and I've got this card selected, and you can see that it's giving me the color that I have here, and this is the hex code for that pinkish color, but it's also telling me the variable name or the color name, so that we can keep using that and use that as a shared language amongst our team and say, oh, what color is that background supposed to be? Oh, it's the card background color. It's much easier than saying, oh, it's the FCBDBD hex code color, or that shade of pink. Because you've got to bear in mind that not everyone working with you will be able to perceive color in the same way that you do. To me, this might be a lovely shade of pink, but if you are one of the many people in the world who has red-green color blindness, you're probably not going to see that as a shade of pink at all. You're going to see that as something completely different. And so it is really useful to have these shared semantic, meaningful words for your colors. Now, another thing that I wanted to show you is that if you delete the color name, you don't have to worry about it. It doesn't break anything, and it means that whilst you don't have that color as a variable or as a saved color in your library anymore, these fill colors are still going to be that original color that you had. So it's not the end of the world if you break it. Now, I wonder if we have any questions to this point. I've jumped ahead with asking questions yet because I was so keen to show you everything so far. That's a reminder that whichever platform that you're on, if you want to ask a question in the comments, it should be able to show it up on our screen here. So I'm just going to have a little look. Do we have any questions yet? And if not, I will keep going. Great. I'm going to keep going. Oh, here we go. How can I use a stroke color from the palette? I'm going to answer that in just 2 seconds in our next section, because our next section is using the color palette. So we're back here in our note card file, and earlier I mentioned to you that there are 3 different places where you can apply color. So one of those is here from the color picker, and from here in the assets once you've added a color. So I'm going to add this color again, and this is going to be our card background color. Now you can use that color from there, but you can also use it from the color palette down here at the bottom, which I can open by pressing this color palette button. Now you can see that the card background color is showing up here as well. Now you can switch between different palettes. So for example, you want to work with your recent colors instead, you can switch that out by using this little triple dot button down here, or you can go back and view your file library. And so here's my card background color. Maybe I'll add this pink. I do actually kind of like the pink and teal as a color combo, a bit nicer than the orange and teal color combo. So I'm going to add this as my card text color. So I'm selecting the swatch, adding it. So it's already populated in here, ready for me to change the name of it. So I'm going to call that card text. It's kind of tricky to see that dark green against the grey. And remember what I said before, we want to make sure that we reapply that colour. So you can tell that it's not reapplied yet because you can see a hex colour in the fill section here. Whereas when I select the card text color that I just created, it will replace it with that token name. It will say card text. And I maybe want to add it to these texts as well. So all of these, now I have so many options. I can choose from card text here, or card text here, or I can do it from here and select card text color in there. So it all depends on how you want your colors displayed, what you've got open, and how you want to interact with it. There are lots of different options there. Now, what if you want to change the stroke color? So this is slightly different. I just showed you, if you select this and you pick a color here, that's not going to change the stroke color, it's going to change the fill color. So what if I want to do the stroke color? Well, I'm going to, first of all, I'll save that stroke color to my file library. So it's even saving its transparency level as well. So I'm going to call this card border. And so I want to apply the card border color to this rectangle. First of all, I need to add a stroke because otherwise it's got nothing to apply a color to. And then if I'm hovering over the palette here, I'm now holding down the Alt key, it's a keyboard shortcut. And now if I select card border, it's going to apply that color as the stroke. So if I select that card text color, it's the wrong one, but it's applying it as a stroke. I'm still holding down the Alt key, or make it the same color as the background. So I'm holding down the Alt key to choose the stroke color. So that answers the question that was asked earlier. And I've shown you how to open and close that palette, and I've shown you how to use it for fills and for strokes. And the final thing that I wanted to mention in this section is a little shortcut. So if you have your recent colors or at some other palette open here, and you are looking at your file library in here, and you're like, oh, but I want to open up this file library colors in my color palette. To do that, you press this droplet button. So this little palette button here. So if you press that, it will open up the current library that you're viewing in the picker in the palette. So I found that's a nice little handy shortcut that we have. Now, I want to get past the boring note card example, and we're going to do that very shortly. But first, are there any questions? Do we have any questions before I move on to the next topic? Right. What about folders in the colors? I noticed the color picker strips the folder name. Now, this is true. So this is one of the aspects of the way that you organize your colors. So if I'm here, I can group colors, and the way that I would group a color is I can rename it. And if you've used Penpot before for organizing typographies or organizing components, this will be very familiar to you. Basically, if you name any of your assets and you give it a group name first, so I'm going to call this card, because maybe I want to group all of the colors for my cards together. And then I do slash and then card background. What this will do is it will take the card background color and put it in a group named card. So you can see now in my colors asset section here, I have this little section for card. So I might do the same for my other colors. I don't know whether it's redundant having card and card as the group name and then card in the name itself. And so these are now all cards in the card group. But if you look in the palette, you can see that it's just got the actual name of the token, I guess, for want of a better word, without the group name. And so maybe it isn't redundant having card in that, and it's actually very useful. There are lots of workarounds for this, but basically right now, there's not a huge amount of space in the palette. You don't want to have a huge amount of text. And so this is kind of the ideal way of displaying it. But if you have other use cases in mind or ideas on how you think it should work for you, I'd really recommend that you make your suggestions in the Penpot community. The Penpot team are really open to hearing your feedback, and they love using ideas from the community to improve their features. So I would totally recommend you go make your suggestions and ask for help, because the team are just really open-minded and really friendly and open to feedback for sure. I will show you in one moment how I do colour naming, which is not the best way, but it is a way. And yeah, maybe we'll jump straight into that. So let's go into using a shared colour library. So I've got these colours that I'm creating from my design, but what if I want to work with an existing set of colours? Now, you may be familiar, if you've watched these previous hands-on sessions, with the libraries section of the assets. If you've used a template before, you've seen the wireframing hands-on that I did, I showed you how to use component libraries there. Colours work in a very similar way. So I'm going to open up my libraries and I am going to look for, here we go, these are the libraries that are already available in my team. So I have a colour scales design system. I'm going to add that in. So I'm going to connect this library to my current file. Now, you might have noticed that it instantly populated the palette down here. So in this palette, I can now choose between my colour scales library, my file library, and my recent colours as well. Now, from here, I can choose between all of these pre-populated colours. If I look in the assets section as well, I have, these are the colours from my local library, I can close that, and these are the colours in this colour scales design system file. I have 132 of them, including brand colours, including utility colours, and including a lot of scale colours. So maybe I want to change the background to maybe butter. So I've got a light butter 050 colour. Maybe I want to change that stroke colour to a darker butter colour. So I'm holding down the Alt keyboard shortcut and selecting butter 600. So that's applied that to the stroke. And I want to replace this card text colour. And this is representing here every object that is selected in here that has this card text colour. If I change it from here, I'm going to choose design system colour scales. It's actually going to replace every single use of card text that I've got selected in this group. So it's a really handy shortcut, that. Now I don't want to do yellow. Yellow and white is not high contrast, so I'm going to go for a brown kind of colour. Like a nice dark brown. And so that's coffee 950, that colour. So butter and coffee, what a lovely combination. And so this is me picking colours from another library that I've already got loaded up there. You can see from how I've named these colours here as well, I've grouped these into brand colours, into scales, and I also have my utility colours down here. I've started all of my utility colours with _util because, as we were mentioning before about the naming of colours, it means that these are all grouped really helpfully right at the beginning of my palette, so it's quite a handy way of organising them. And while I do have these sort of quirky colour names, strawberry, silver, pumpkin, I mean, colour I find very evocative, so I quite like having these cool colour names in here, but it is also, as I mentioned before, not everyone perceives colour in the same way as you, and it's really important that you're not just making things accessible for the people that are using your designs, but for the people that you're working with. And so because I have colours like this, I'm also adding a key in my brand names where I'm actually saying, look, cobalt, that's blue. Cyan, that's another shade of blue. Fuchsia, that's pink. And so I'm trying to be clear in at least providing one location where I say, look, this is the colour in a term that everyone can understand, whether they see colour in the same way or not. So I think that's a really handy thing to have. Now I'm going to show you the original file where all of these colours are stored. And this is in my colour scales file. Now this has got a huge number of scales in it right now. I think I'm going to add more in the future as well. Now you might be familiar with the way of storing colours in scales like this. It's used very often in a lot of web development frameworks, and this idea where you have one shade of a colour and then you map it from its brightest to its darkest shade, and it can make it very easy to swap out colours with different hues. So maybe you want to swap out a pink for a green, but you want to have a similar level of darkness in the text or lightness in the background. And so having scales like this are very useful for creating consistency across your design and making it easier to maintain. And you can see here in this assets folder, this is where the colours are originally organised with these names. And they're alphabetical, and that's the reason why I use 0, 50, because if I put 50, then coffee 50 will come after or before coffee 500, which is not the right order. So I do that to preserve the order as well. So once I have some colour scales like this, and I have a design that I want to create, perhaps a design a little like this, there's a kind of an intermediate step. When you're trying to work out how do I want to use colour in my design and what is the way to use it effectively so that it works well for text, so that it works well for buttons, so it works well for backgrounds. And this is why I've created this little colour tokens file. And this is kind of like a little playground for me to test out the colours that I want to use and see, do they work for text? Do they work for backgrounds? Will they work across all of these different use cases that are very common in UI design? Because sometimes when you're using colour and you're designing straight into a mock-up, it's very difficult to see how that colour will work in a lot of different scenarios at once. And so this is why I've created this file. Now, if you let me know in the comments if you think it would be useful, I will share this file as a template, and I'll show you the reason why I find it very helpful. So for example here, I have text on backgrounds. It's the most important thing to consider, the colour accessibility of those. So I want to see how different body text, accent text, that might be a link colour, emphasis text, how well these all work against this body background colour. So this is like a little sort of placeholder, like test area, and then I've got the swatches for each colour above and below with the labels that I've given them as well. Now each of the colours in here, this is my local library, I have a dark mode version and a light mode version. And these are all named colours. So I have a light mode, accent background, light mode, accent border. And for dark mode, I have exactly the same again, but the dark mode version. Now I've used DM and LM at the beginning of each colour name, even though it's in the dark and light folders, because it works so well when I bring up the palettes here, that if I switch to my file library, I can scroll through all my dark mode colours, and then I can scroll through all of my light mode colours. So what I've done here is I have imported the library, connected the library for those colour scales that I showed you before. And I've decided I'm going to use mostly the sort of purple and this orange colours, a little bit of indigo, a little bit of the coffee colours. And so I've tested all of these out and I've added them. So for example, maybe I want to change the background colour in light mode. I love a coloured background, like white is boring. Why not go for something a bit more exciting? And the way that I would edit this in order to test it, I'm going to go to the token, not to the fill on the canvas, but go to the token itself. And I'm going to edit this light mode body background colour. And here in the colour picker, I've got that colour scales library. And so this allows me to choose from all of the colours that I have in here, but inside of a different file. So I'm going to go for, so this pumpkin 400 if I hover over, I'm not sure whether it picks up on the screen, it probably doesn't. If I hover over these swatches, it will show you the name of the colour as well. So I'm hovering over Pumpkin 400 and I'm going to choose that as my body background colour, and I save the colour style. And that has updated, you see my body background colour. It's also updated the little swatches that say body background as well. And I can quickly have a little scroll through and go, okay, I'm quite liking the very orange colour. Fits my Halloween theme, so that works for me. Now when I go to my homepage again, now because my homepage library is connected to the colour tokens library, so it's pulling the colours in from here, I've got an update because I've just changed the light mode body background colour. Now it's telling me I've got an update in my shared library. I'm going to go to more info. If I go to updates, it tells me, oh, there's an update in the perfumery colour tokens, and this light mode body background colour has been updated. So I want to update it. I hit update, and now that body background colour, which I'm using for the fill colour here on my homepage, has been updated to that much dark orange is the wrong term, but this sort of richer orange colour. And so that is how I've applied the colours using those different libraries. I've used 2 different libraries into this homepage mock-up, and I've connected these libraries together to make them easier to maintain, to keep the swatches for the different scales separate from my tokens, separate from the mock-ups themselves, and it means the whole of my team can access all of those shared libraries too. So I think that is everything for that section. Do I have any more questions at this point? It's a reminder that you can ask questions regardless of the platform that you're on. If you ask them in the comments, we should be able to see them. If not, you can always go to the Penpot community and ask a question there as well. And especially if you ask it on the post for this hands-on session. But to be honest, if you ask any question there, I'll probably see it. I like hanging out in there. So let me know. Do we have any questions? Right. When using a library file to build a design that comes with palettes, is it more efficient to edit those palettes in the library file or to create a new one in the project file? I think it's efficient to edit it in the library file. This is what I've done with this setup here. So I have this completely separate library here of all of these different colours, and you can see there's a huge number in here. Now, when I'm trying to design an actual page design like this, do I want to be wading through all of those different swatches, or do I want to make those colour decisions at a better intermediary point? And so I decided that this colour tokens area is a better point at which to be making decisions about colour. Now, sure, I might change my mind and tweak some of the colours in my mock-up design. Maybe the changes I make in my mock-up design I will reflect back into my colour tokens. Maybe here I'll be like, oh, I quite like this big light coloured heading colour. That's not currently in my colour tokens. And so maybe I will go back into my colour tokens and I will add a special case for that heading colour, and I'll add it in here. And so I find that this is a really effective way to organise them. Of course, with design tokens coming up in Penpot, I think there will be a lot more powerful ways for you to connect different colours together and create a much more maintainable and exportable system as well. And so I think that that's a really cool option to look into in the not too distant future. But for now, I think that this is my favourite way of working with colour. It helps keep everything encapsulated into the different decision-making stages of your design. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well then maybe I will go to how you might want to share your colour library and create it to begin with. So for that, I'm going to go back to my beautiful little pumpkin note card design. Now, the colours I have for this pumpkin note card, I've got my card group with my background and my border and my text colours. Now I've changed all of these since, so maybe I'll put those back. So card border color and the text color. I prefer this text color. I'm going to actually edit the text color so that it matches this coffee color. There we go. And so now I have these colors sitting here in my local library, but I want to share them with the rest of my team or with myself, just in different projects. And so what I want to do is open up the library section here. And from here, I have my file library and I can publish it by just hitting the publish button. Done, magic, just like that. It's now shared. One of the ways you can tell that it's now shared is that this little library book icon has now appeared next to the name of my file. And if I go into my workspace, it's got a little blue icon over the file as well. And if I go to the library section in my workspace, here I can see the different libraries that are available in my team. And the note card here, lucky it's only got 3 colors, so you can see them all in this library. This is my perfumery note card library. It's not a great name for a library. Maybe I would rename it to card colors or something like that to make it easier for my team to understand what it's for. But I'm not going to rename it that right now because I want to share these files with you later, and that will just make it really confusing. And so now if I went back into my perfumery homepage and I was like, okay, I want to use those note card colors in this design, I will go to my Assets tab and I will open up Libraries. And now we can see these are the libraries that I already have connected to this file, and the options, the shared libraries from the rest of my team. I have this perfumery note card library and I can connect it by adding it in there. And now I can see these colors, these card colors, in the perfumery note card section in the Assets tab down here. Now, do I have any other questions? I think the final questions of this hands-on session, I have one more fun thing that I can show you, but I think first of all, let's see if we have any good questions going on. Can I export my color palette to code? Absolutely, yes, you can. Now, if I select my board or any object in my UI and I go to inspect mode here, now you can see that the fill color of the immediate object I have selected, so this is the page itself, is visible here in the info tab, and I have the hex color, I have the name of the color as well, the variable name you might want to call it, and I also have the options to pick the RGBA value for that color and the HSLA value for that color, and I can copy those from the little copy button here as well. And also if I go to the code tab, I can get the colors from the CSS in here as well. Now, again, I maybe at a later date will show you a little preview of what's coming up with design tokens in Penpot, because that will also provide you with another way to really easily export all of your color tokens to code as well. Do you have any other questions? And if you thought of a really good question that you want to ask later on, do just jump into the Penpot community. There's a very active community there that loads of people will answer your questions, but I'm often hanging out in there as well. So, do we have any more questions? If not, I've got another cool plugin I can show you that's related to colours. So let's do that. Right, so say I have created my colour scales system like this, but I don't want to spend, and trust me, it took a really long time to go through and add each of these swatches like this. It was very time consuming. And it's really important to have these kinds of documents to share with your team. So I would say it is worth the time to build up a scale like this. But if you've already added all of the colors into your color assets here, So you've already done all this hard work. You don't want to necessarily do the hard work of putting them all on the canvas. There is a really cool new Penpot plugin that works for this. I remember when I was first, I was opening up a template once and I saw that there were colours supposed to be included in the template, but I couldn't find them. And they were all in the assets section, but they weren't anywhere in the file itself. And so I said to Andy, oh, I don't know where the colours are. And Andy was like, there's going to be a really good plugin for that. And he showed me this plugin, and now I get to use it for myself. So say I haven't created these swatches here, and I'm going to create a new page, and I'm going to call that swatches. Swatches, if you didn't know, by the way, is just the name for the little like rectangle or square of colour. So I'm going to have a swatches page here, and now I'm opening up the plugins, and I've installed this plugin from the Penpot Hub, and this is Create Palette from Library. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm setting it a bit of a challenge here, I think, because, oh, maybe I've given it too big a library. Oh, here we go, here we go. It's coming. Now what this is doing is it is taking every single one of the colours from my assets colours panel and adding them into an individual swatch where I can see how each of these colours look and the name of them at a glance without having to do any of the tedious work of adding all of those shapes and labels for myself, because that is a time-consuming job. So I think that that's a really cool, and then you can, if you want to change the appearance of it, one of the things I really like about this is that there's an outline shadow on all the text so that the text is readable on top of the swatch. And yeah, you can tweak it if you want to change the display or make it more branded to fit something for your team, but I would say that this saves you so much time and effort. And that's one of the really cool things about Penpot plugins, is that they're going to have the ability to save you a lot of time and effort. And if you want to create a plugin that works for your workflow and for your team, you're able to create that yourself using everyday web technologies. It's really straightforward. I had a look at it, even I can create a plugin, so you're definitely in with a good chance of being able to do it. So I would really recommend that everyone checks out plugins as well. Now, before I wrap up, do we have any final questions? I will be writing all of this up as a tutorial for the Penpot blog as well. If we don't, then, well, I've got to tell you all to sign up for Penpot because that's how you can try out all of these cool designs and try out these tools. I will add each of these files that I've added in the demo here. I will add these to the community straight after finishing up with this live stream. And so I will save these files exactly as they are, and I will give you links to the plugins as well that I've used so you can try those out for yourself. You should sign up for Penpot because it's free. Why wouldn't you? And it's great for both designers and developers, or if you're a designer developer like me, and I would highly, really recommend it. Please give us feedback on these videos, on these live streams. Tell us what you think. Please tell us if there's anything that you want us to do a hands-on session about in the future. I love your ideas. I've had a lot of feedback recently about maybe doing something where we build a design from scratch and build up a more complex layout. So that is an idea we have got for the future. But the very next hands-on, which is going to be on the 27th of November, we are going to be doing an introduction to design systems. I know a lot of you have asked for this, and you can see from today that there is a huge amount you can use Penpot for design systems, and colour is a big part of that, but it is not the only part of your design system. So I'm really looking forward to digging into that in more depth, and hopefully I'll have a few more exciting templates that you can make use of then as well. Now, also make sure you subscribe or you follow us on the various platforms wherever you're watching this, and that way you can be the first to find out about any of the new content that we've got, or when the next live sessions are going to happen. I really appreciate you being here today in the comments and asking questions. You make these live sessions what they are, you make it so I'm not just sitting here talking to myself. So thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.